The difficult one on the big stage has obviously been China. I would say it's a subject on which I have spoken publicly before. At the end of the day, for us, we recognize it's a neighbor, it's a big neighbor, today a very significant economy and significant power. But at the end of the day, any relationship has to be based on a high degree of mutuality. There has to be a respect for each other's interests, sensitivity for each other's interests, and there has to be an adherence to agreements which were reached between us. And it is that departure from what was agreed between us which is today at the heart of the difficult phase that we are passing through with China. And the bottom line there is, at the end of the day, the state of the border will determine the state of the relationship, and the state of the border today is still abnormal. Now, all of that I really put in terms of the first achievement, which is the global stage. But there are three factors at the global level which I think you should all keep in mind as well. One, that we are not just playing politics at the global level. We are also shaping the global economy, and we are actually building our own economy as a consequence of that. And that building of the Indian economy today has to factor in the opportunities that arise from competitive geopolitics. That if you look at global companies today, a lot of global companies are making choices which are through a geopolitical lens. And that today gives us possibilities which may not have existed earlier. The second is that particularly after COVID, there is a search in the world for more reliable supply chains, more resilient supply chains, more redundant supply chains. There is discomfort with relying on a single geography, what you call economic over-concentration. And here too, there are opportunities. And in the digital domain, there is a growing concern about transparency and trust. So where your data lives, where your data is harvested, where your data is processed, all of these matter. So if you look at the digital world, at the supply chain world, at the larger investment patterns which are today being influenced by geopolitics, that too is part of the big stage. And some of that I think you could see as an influence over the outcomes which we got during the Prime Minister's visit. Now, and of course, from our side, we've made it significantly better for ourselves by improving the business climate in this country, by building the infrastructure, etc. But that's something I will talk about later. The second change is in regard to the neighborhood. And you saw that actually on the first day that Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. The idea of inviting all the leaders of our neighborhood to the oath-taking itself was a divergence from our political traditions, certainly from the way the neighborhood saw itself and saw us, and how we saw the neighborhood. Now, over these 9 years, we have pursued relentlessly what we call the neighborhood first policy. The neighborhood first policy essentially means that we look at our neighbors, there are some exceptions, we look at our neighbors and we consciously take a generous, non-reciprocal, long-term view of building relations with them. And that means that if it is necessary for us to invest in greater connectivity, in greater flows between us, in making investments in their economy, we should be prepared to do that, because at our stage of growth, it is absolutely vital that we have a benign neighborhood. And a benign neighborhood doesn't happen by itself. It happens when the largest country in a neighborhood invests in the rest of the neighborhood, and that is essentially what we have tried to do. Now, if you look at the record of the last 9 years, even if I say so myself, I would say it is actually quite an impressive record in terms of project delivery in the neighborhood. So, if you take a country like Nepal, the power generation in Nepal, the power flows from Nepal, If you look at Bangladesh, in fact even Nepal, the supply of fuel from India to them, the change, the facilities today at the border checkpoints, the roads between us, the railway movement between us. So almost every aspect of connectivity and people-to-people movement and economic interaction between us, that has undergone a dramatic change. And it's very interesting that over this period, as frankly we had expected, today we are less and less seen as, in terms of I would say we are less and less pulled into the politics of our neighbors. That we are seen today as a permanent stabilizing factor in our neighborhood, who have the ability across political divides to get along with all parties and all governments. And that's exactly the kind of neighborhood we are trying to create. We've had 2 stress tests in the neighborhood, one on COVID, where we proactively moved to provide vaccines and even economic assistance. And secondly, in the case of Sri Lanka, they had a particularly serious financial crisis. And if you look at the speed and scale at which we gave financial support to Sri Lanka, we have never done anything like that ever in our history. So where the neighborhood is concerned, I would therefore assert to you with a fair degree of confidence that neighborhood first policy has worked. It has built the kind of relationships and goodwill that we would like in the neighborhood. In many ways, it has also been advantageous both for our neighbors and for us. Our mutual economic exchanges have actually gone up significantly in this period. So that's the kind of report card I would present to you in the neighborhood. Just as China was an exception on the big stage, I would say Pakistan obviously is the exception when it comes to the neighborhood. Again, it needs very little explanation.